Hey guys, how's it going? We are here with Edmond Sandor.
Sandor.
All right, and we are kind of going low bit right at the moment because we're just starting somewhere.
Doing something new.
And we're going to start doing some wrestling podcasts, but we'd like to introduce ourselves. My name's Chris, and my son here is...
I'm a professional wrestler.
All right. And what's your name, so we all know us?
Edmond Sandor.
All right.
But I normally go by Edmond Sandor.
There you go.
So,
So
that's my nickname, by the way.
we are at a park location asked to be non-disclosed, and we had to go through some legal stuff to make sure everything was on the up and up here. So we're going to try to keep the language to an applicable content.
Yeah.
So we're doing a podcast for Edmond's school and classwork. And Edmond, where do you attend college online?
Full Sail.
Okay, Full Sail University. And that's in Orlando, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I love Orlando.
Right. So, you'll see what we'll have is like a static page or a logo. When you're hearing this on YouTube and elsewhere, it's like entitled "From Homeless to Pro Wrestler," and Edmond's mother and I never got married on paper, and what do adults do? They just work shit out over time, and then sadly, Melissa, Edmond's mom passed away in 2018. And so we were just sitting there one time. Some church folks in the neighborhood dropped off some food to us. And we're sitting there, we're thinking, well, what do you want to do? And Edmond, you remember how you worded that?
Okay. I'm going to try to do it right.
You don't have to be perfect or anything.
Yeah.
It's just us talking here.
I want to work with robots and become a professional wrestler.
There you go. So that's what we started doing. And we ended up doing a couple family vacations that we already had planned. And just went ahead on out, and we traveled with someone that was speaking at a convention, name withheld. We've been asked not to mention their names because just for legalese reasons, they're dealing with trouble on their end. So that's just how it goes. And they were like, hey, I'm speaking at this one convention. Can you add that itinerary onto your map, because some of the WWE people will be there.
Yep.
Sure. So we saw Vicky Guerrero.
Yeah, real shock.
And we didn't even expect her to be there.
Yeah. Rey Mysterio was also there.
Yeah, Rey Mysterio.
Ray.
And Steve Austin was there, but it was like the tickets were already sold out for that one.
Yeah.
So, which is understandable.
Too.
Yeah, it was like $215 a person.
Nope.
But I'm not complaining about the price. It was just, we didn't expect all those people to be there. And then we got back from one trip, and we get a call from someone that I've been asked not to mention by name. And he's like, hey, call this number up. Just give them a call, let them know who you are, that we talk to you, and everything's cool, and you can get your son into a wrestling camp. I'm like, cool, that sounds awesome. And so we call up that number, and then I'm thinking, I'm getting punked here. There is no way this is actually happening. And then the guy on the other end of the phone, he's like, oh yeah, you're the dad with the music, right? Like your wife passed away not too long ago. Yeah, they told me all about you, Sure, just go up here, sign this, fill out the form here, and no problem. We'll see you soon. I hang up the phone, and it was Booker T. Right. And just a heads up, we're not in the perfectly divine setting right now. We're just starting somewhere. So we're walking at a park that's down the street from where we used to live. So our place where Edmond's car is sounds like a Jethro Tull concert.
It's currently the afternoon, so much rush. We're about train tracks.
Right, there's a train track just down the street from us. So, we get Edmund signed up for reality wrestling, and the funny thing is our in-laws outside of our household think we're making it all up. They think it's all made up, it's all in our mind, all this stuff. And so we get down there and they think, oh, he's just photoshopped into the video. Like, okay. So a lot of times what happens is, and people that we knew, and this is even before the pandemic, right? And you know how during the pandemic you noticed how people around you got really distant, or they just followed everything that they were told without questioning it. And you don't have to be like one of these kooks or cattle mutilation people or whatever the heck it is, or anything like that. But you notice how people were real distant towards you, even if you were taking precautions, right? And it's kind of like, how some people like that businessman that was different than the rest of us. And, you saw how people kind of separated themselves from each other, during that time. And I think we can sit down for a minute here. So, one of the important things to remember is that there's no real divine timing, right? We talked to a household name person that we're not allowed to say who, because they're like, hey, just don't mention my name. I'm going to help you set up your podcast and give you some pointers and all that stuff, and just don't mention my name. I don't want people asking me for stuff. I'm like, cool, I got you. And I'm on a Zoom call with basically a billionaire, and he's like, okay, this is how I want you to set up your son's podcast. I want you to do this, this, and this, this, and this, and I want you to do these things. Cool. And that's someone who wants to see you succeed. You'll see like people like Booker T. I mean, I used to watch him when I was my son's age, even younger than my son. And one second. And watching Booker and Stevie Ray back in the day, and there is not a single discussion about race. I mean, it was like, how when babies are first born and maybe they're starting to realize, oh, there's another baby over there, and they don't understand race until they're taught about how messed up history is and things that happened in the past, right? And then they start realizing, oh, there's all this division, and all this stuff, amongst people for stupid reasons, right? That don't make any sense. And we started to notice that with people around us, where we actually just went out and it's like, yeah, we're not high rolling it. We were staying at a Fairfield Inn or something like that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like we were in the penthouse or something like that. And how people just got so ridiculously angry with us for actually just following a goal, right? And say, hey, we're learning as we go. You know, we've got to start somewhere. There's no divine perfect timing for it. Let's just make it happen, right? And, you know, the goal is what keeps you motivated. And you think about this all the time, you know, and you're like, man, you know, I don't know how we're going to make this AI stuff that we're working on. But if I don't give up and I still work on stuff, I stay consistent at stuff all the time, as much as I can, eventually it starts coming together. And this gentleman's working on his yard work, so we'll start walking again. So what happens is, and this is what separates you from a lot of your friends. And this isn't medical, legal, financial advice, anything like that. It's just one black metal musician talking, you know, with a pro wrestler here. And when you decide to just say, hey, I'm going to go out and make this happen, and then you have all these other excuses, you know, around you. Well, you don't have, you know, who was it? One of the guys in Tennessee, he says he has a what was it, a voice for print and a face for radio or something like that. And it's like, well, you don't have a perfect voice. I'm like, so what? Who cares? You know, I got to start somewhere. And, you know, there's no edit on this. It's just straight to upload. And I think it was before we went to Texas to Reality Wrestling. Yeah, let's head over to that one. You know, I had released a neural upgrade, Living Beyond Plan A, which is kind of like a self-help meets Stargate type of thing. My wife was New Age. I wasn't, but, you know, I always wanted to support something she was interested in. And towards the end of that project, before it got released, we started getting, like, death threats. I mean, like, people from church people, supposedly church people. And, I mean, it was like, 2 of them were reported to Clintonville police because they came from the actual church leaders, right? And so, and it wasn't just towards us, it was towards like over 100 other people. And it was just like, our editor got threatened with like blackmail and all this other nonsense. And so it was just, it was real creepy. She had to move to Texas. Yeah, she had to move because we're in Ohio right now. And so it's amazing. People will talk a big game, like, and there's people excluded from these comments here, but you're at the gaming table, you know, pen and paper D&D or something. There used to be, 20 years ago, there was this WWE pen and paper game called Know Your Role. And I had written a supplement for a game series. Got published on a smaller scale. And I think we're going to sit down right here for a minute. Yeah. There's an AC behind us, but it's okay. And like, we lost all of our friends because we actually went out and got published. And it was kind of weird because it's like you see people say, man, that would be so cool to be a wrestler or be a writer or be a published artist or something. And then you go out and do it, even if it's not perfect, and you get dumped on for it. And it's weird how that works. And why, Edmond, in your own words, why do you think people flip out when you say, hey, I'm going to be a wrestler and work with robots? Yeah, why do you think people flip out? Just in your own words.
Okay, sometimes people get jealous.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was like me when I was your age. We were still just breaking out of the DOS era. Back in the day, the 486 VGAs or something like that. And it was when right when was it Halo Half-Life had come out.
Yeah.
And you had to get a new computer just to get Half-Life to work,
Right.
you know, because it changed the whole 486, you know, like profile of the computer. And back then, if you had any type of understanding of computers, you were deemed a hacker. And I remember being at, I was working at a grocery store. I was working at a grocery store, and one of the middle managers comes up, and this was a grocery store known for just like everyone was peasants, everyone was throwaway people. People were threatened with termination and bodily harm by management on a like hourly basis, you know. And one of the managers walks up to me and is like, "Hey, so-and-so said in the break room that you were interested in computers." I'm like, "Yeah." "Well, why are you working here?" "Well, I just have an interest in computers and I needed a job, so there we go." And fast forward 20 years, a little bit over 20 years. And, you know, I'm unemployed. I'm a retired forensic scientist. And Edmond and I are, how long have we been homeless?
7 months.
About 10 months.
Yeah.
And someone had asked me at a job interview, "So what have you been doing?" I was like, "Well, we've been going to Wi-Fi spots and I've been learning about this AI stuff, you know." And they're like, "Well, why are you learning about AI if you want to work here?" The same exact response. It's like they don't want you to progress as a person, right? And after Edmond's mother passed away, there was this talk within the rest of the family that I wasn't the most applicable parent. However, Edmond graduated with honors from OHVA, which is like a homeschool organization, and now he has a full scholarship to Full Sail University, studying AI engineering. You know, and it's like, and I, you know, Edmond and I are looked at as the bad guys. So, let's go for another couple spins here. So, we're trying to get our steps in since our gym membership is on hold. So, Edmond, you mentioned that some people get jealous when you go out and do something, and sometimes we hear people say, "Well, you gotta watch what you say or do online. You gotta, you know, you need to be." I mean, before you even say anything, they're already up your backside or on your case. And we were at a holiday one time, like a family reunion, and a famous actress who can be slightly colorful at times checked in on my wife and I, because my wife, Edmond's mom at the time, had cancer, and it had metastasized, and you know, this actress was checking in on us. And people were raising holy hell because we just happened to know someone. And it was like an hour later, one of the cousins got kicked off Twitter for making threats against a sitting president at the time. And nothing was said to them, but God forbid we had someone that we knew checking in on us. And so sometimes people get jealous because they lose the control that they think they have over you, right? And they will say, well, you know, everything in life's a scam. Don't try this, don't do that, don't do this. And they're just showing their insecurity towards you. Like, and then let's fast forward a little bit. So we went to sell our house, and because this like BlackRock Vanguard place was going to triple the mortgage, like the monthly mortgage, even though we hadn't missed a payment in 4 years. And then one of the home equity line of credit company stopped accepting payments, and you know, it was a big crap show, the whole thing. And Edmond went to basically help out his aunt. He wasn't really staying there because that wasn't the real plan. The real plan was, hey, we can just use Edmond to get our agenda pushed through and to make sure he doesn't follow through with his plans of being a pro wrestler, right? Yeah, Edmond, what was this whole thing? Like, hey, if the dentist needs to call you or, so, you know, transfer your records, dental records down to, up to Cleveland, or it was always, hey, just have them email them.
No, it doesn't work.
And then it got to the point where, sorry about that siren, we were trying to avoid that.
We live in the city, so.
Yeah. So, instead of, oh yeah, it's just coming right by us. Wow. And some moose too. Okay. So, a lot of times, parents who are toxic parents, not just someone who doesn't fully understand what you're doing, you know, sometimes family and friends and, you know, other people will be like, oh man, I got you, I understand what you're talking about now. Cool, right on, you got something that's working for you. There you go. When we say toxic, we mean someone who's never got anything good to say to you. They're always dumping on you. And of course, they're going to turn around and claim to be the victim. They'll cycle back around. And what happens is these people they want the authority over top of you, but they don't want the responsibility of dealing with pushing you away or pushing you around. And, you know, Edmond, what happened when a family member, like, just almost violently was talking to you on the phone? Their phone number went out to like 5,000 people.
Yep.
And so they wanted to, instead of just talking to Edmond directly, they were trying to get a hold of people on his social media, right? And they didn't want to have the responsibility of dealing with, okay, well, hey, you guys want to talk to me and accuse Chris and Edmond of wrongdoing? You know, go ahead and say that to me and see what happens, right? And so Edmond's aunt made the mistake of calling someone that we knew, and their spouse was a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And that put an end to that real quick. So you'll run into this situation whenever you start something new. Hell, it could be even just building the next Lego set or something, or just losing that next 5 pounds. People are telling you, well, I don't, like our uncle used to tell us, I don't know what you're trying to prove. And you never try to impress people that hate your guts, you know. There was a time where I wasn't living as healthy as I could have. And then one holiday I just didn't drink, you know, wanted to, I just chose not to. and so we had basically a healthy holiday, and we get these drunk text messages saying, hey, we don't know what you're trying to prove. And it was like, I wasn't trying to prove anything, you know. And sorry, I'm just wearing swimming trunks. We had some rain this morning. So as things progress, you're going to get people that think, oh, you just think you're all flash and all that. It's like, no, I'm not better than anyone else. I had a goal. My son and I had a goal. We made it happen. So there, you know. And so we've actually been violently canceled by people that, you know, we thought we were tight with. Someone's not a social worker that we used to meet up with on a regular basis, but they work for like a social services like department, and their response was, hey, you're the wrong skin color, you're not worth saving, you have to be, you really need to feel guilty for who you are, all this other nonsense. And what they're saying is that they're expressing their insecurities towards you. And whenever you're dealing with someone like a family member who treats you that way, it's like you ask them, is my reality not allowed? And because all this family member does is complain and tell me how wrong I am, and it's gotten to the point where we stopped going to family holidays, you know, and because it just wasn't worth it. I mean, like when I was making hand over fist money, when I was in the fixed mindset, if you want to call it that, and it was like, hey, what's your step increase look like? Hey, what's the equity in the house look like? What's, you know, and it's like, I don't know. And it's like, you know, they didn't have anything else to talk about. You know, they were like, hey, what's the next chapter in your book on? Your next book on, you know? You finished that crazy survival horror thing? You know, the one with all the kooks and stuff. It wasn't anything like that. It was, you had to validate your own existence every holiday. And it got to the point where I just wasn't even going to go to holiday anymore. And then after Edmond's mother passed away, what did Pop, he's not here, Poppy's not here anymore, but what did he like say to us that kind of put the nail in the coffin? Let me get a little closer to you here. It's pretty hardcore. So we're just standing there, and I was having a non-alcoholic beer just for the belch factor, you know. And he's like, hey, so what's your income look like? And I simply said, hey, I only disclose my income to the IRS. And he's like, well, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, they're going to be keeping an eye on. And I'm like, who is they? And he's like, well, you know, there's a narrative that needs to be followed here. And so we left right after Thanksgiving dinner. And we were supposed to be there like another 2 days or something. And it was just like, yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and leave. And now Edmond's grandmother won't even talk to him. And it's kind of sad, really. And a lot of times people realize that they've been figured out. And there's times to forgive and forget and just walk away from stuff. And then they're like a very famous Hollywood producer said this. It said, you can forgive them, but don't forget why it happened. And we've been dealing with, you know, a really unique situation, Edmond, where people have had a certain understanding of us since the beginning. And there's certain things that our lawyer has asked us not to talk about, but we did find a series of emails in my wife's AOL account, like the old AOL accounts, like the AOL Gmails, the email accounts, where they basically thought Edmond and I were just genetic crap from the very beginning. And I was kind of like this beta person that really didn't have... I was so discouraged when I met Edmond's mom back in the day that she's the one who encouraged me to go out and just make it happen. And I became a forensic scientist. I originally did like corporate communications, and then graduated during the crunch of 2008, and then during the Pell Grant era with Mr. Obama, I went and got I was one of 13 people that got the forensics degree program at the school I went to. And now I'm unemployable because I'm overqualified, So, but there's a lot more four-letter words I can use with that. I'll save that for another time. But one of the things that we experienced, Edmond, was as we've said, okay, well, this is what our plans are, this is what we're going to do, and we didn't expect to be homeless this long.
We have a place waiting for us.
Yeah, we have a place that's already waiting for us. We didn't have to go through all you have to have, like, make 4 times the amount,
Signer.
and have the guarantor, and you have to be either right or left, or whatever excuse it is.
The only thing is, the first month is like a little bit
steep,
but yeah.
They have like the deposit down, on the first month, which is not a big deal.
No problem.
So that's why we're doing a Patreon as well,
Mm-hmm.
so we can, because we're living in Edmond's car that's now dead.
Yeah, we're going to trade that in with something else.
And, it's just, I've been looking for corporate work as well as just about anything, and I just keep getting turned down, and I'm waiting to hear back from 2 other places. So it was like...
Hear back from my other place.
Yeah, and we were both working for the same organization, just different locations.
Different shifts, too.
And my position got removed, so I got basically laid off. The way they went about it, I've been asked not to mention their name openly because that person was relieved of their position as well, because the way they went about it was highly illegal. And then they have some moron at Edmond's location that this guy threatens people with a firearm openly. And let's just say he can't legally own a firearm because the same manager at work, at Edmond's work, has like 4 counts of domestic battery. So that's going to catch up with them in the long run. So Edmond's looking for some more applicable work, and it's just so volatile out there right now. And sometimes you look at these like, well, how do I find work? And you go into these how do I find work forums, and 90% of it is just telling you to give up. Well, you're better off dead. You're better off, not even existing, all this other shit. And it's the same stuff we heard from, our family outside of our household, was that, my mom growing up, she used to say, well, you shouldn't put yourself in that situation. You shouldn't burn your bridges. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. And she wasn't taking into account that, gee, I left a job back then because I was getting, threatened like every hour on the hour. I wasn't the one who burnt the bridge, right? And you look at my mother, who was never there. I mean, it's like an episode of Aaron Clary, the guy who did the Numbers book or something on YouTube, where the mom just wasn't there. My mom wasn't there. And, my dad had died, when I was younger. And it just got to the point where I didn't even talk to my mom for a long time because she would just flip out, right? Yeah. And it was kind of disappointing because you think, oh, he wants to be a wrestler, or he wants to be this forensic scientist or a writer. And my mom would go through and delete like the chapters that I'd written like the night before, and like on the computer, or she'd throw out like the stuff that I typed. I had this brother typewriter, so I mean, it's almost like they didn't want you to grow up. And the reason a lot of times parents that are like that don't want you to grow up is because you're going to figure stuff out. Yeah. They're like, oh, that's why they're talking to me that way. They're afraid I'm going to outdo them when I have no interest in like showing off or being all flash or anything like that. Mm-hmm. They're afraid you're not going to go with the narrative, right? You're not going to, laugh at their stupid jokes, or, you're going to be like, yeah, Edmond's like, hey, I'm going to go out and be a pro wrestler, so there, and I'm working with AI. And to this day, there are family members that think that's all made up. It's like, oh, it's just in your dad's head. And then they call the school, and the school calls social services on the family member, right? So Edmond, enough with me kind of rambling on here. So as a family, when did we start watching wrestling? It's like 15 or something? 2014. Yeah, 2014, yeah. And I think we went to, a Raw taping. A taping of Raw for the first time.
Yeah, it was so long ago.
Yeah, I have the photo of that somewhere.
Yeah, been a while.
Right. Let's go back around this other way here. So I remember you asking me, it's like, Dad, are they really fighting, or is it just characters?
Some of the characters I still think are real.
Right. And it was like when in AEW where MJF came out, and he got hit in the face with a 40.
Yeah, that's when
So he's a hell of an actor, though.
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to play a villain or a heel, and still, like, even when he's off, like when he's not even on TV, I mean, that's pretty rad. So, because we didn't, when I was Edmond's age, or a little bit younger than him, we thought WCW was real, but WWF at the time was fake. And then Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Jesse Ventura, and Sergeant Slaughter were on, and Mark Henry were on the USO tour, and they came to speak at all the schools, right? And that was pretty rad. And then I fell out of wrestling for a while there because I was in a really, I wouldn't say depressed state of being. I was just in a very discouraged state of being at the time. And then someone who's no longer with us anymore, as far as association wise, I went to an ECW show with them, and I was like, man, this is pretty wild, because like the Insane Clown Posse guys, Shaggy and Jay, they did this like table match where Shaggy did this like 450 kamikaze thing off the balcony through a table and everything.
They can't do that nowadays.
Yeah, it's too much liability. So, but Edmond, what was when you first started wrestling? Who were your favorite? Who were your favorite people to watch?
I have a lot of favorites nowadays.
Well, what was the first three that kind of like, man, this one's actually pretty tight, you know?
Okay.
And it's just us talking, so.
I know. It's.
So I'll tell you what, I'll go first.
Good idea.
So, Alexa Bliss,
Sure.
just finer than plate of collard greens.
Greatest star.
And then she was a cheerleader for OSU for a while
I
there.
remember that.
Yeah. And then I liked Asuka, and I think Asuka came up on someone's radar for a minute there.
No.
She didn't.
Uh,
Okay.
Later.
And then I started liking Roman Reigns when they were
He's always
like the DC, like the Shield characters.
That's Marvel, not DC.
Yeah, Marvel. Okay. So, Edmond, what was your first three?
Oh Lord. Okay. Man, it's been a very long time. Shoot. Well, give me a sec.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's really tough. Wow, I really don't know.
Okay. So we liked the New Day
Yeah.
because they were really good, like really real popular with the kids. And who's the one who has the video game channel? Was that Xavier?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Was.
And
I haven't watched Raw or SmackDown in a while.
yeah, it's been a few minutes.
They did like roster changes.
Yeah, and then let's fast forward a little bit because we want to keep this episode under an hour. And Edmond has delayed speech, but autism and delayed speech aren't
not an excuse.
right. It's not an excuse. You know, we're just
I'm just getting started.
we got to start somewhere,
That's
right?
what I'm saying, yeah.
So there was one really big highlight next to Booker T that really kind of got us into the whole, hey, let's see how this stuff actually works type of stuff. Because I think Edmond's grandmother called us when we got to Texas, and she wanted to talk to you, and I'm like, well, he's at wrestling camp. He's like, well, sure, he said that was made up. You're really in Texas? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, hello. So, Shari is Edmond's aunt. So, I don't think we were allowed to say her name, but it just came out. Big deal. That's not the real pronunciation of her name. That's just the way she goes by it. So, so where the hell were we? We were driving back up from, we went to, don't say his name. We saw this Hollywood person who was doing a speaking engagement. And we're coming back up from Tennessee. That was like, it was during the last day of the lockdown when nothing still worked. Like the shower in the hotel didn't even work. You know, so we're smelling like crotch and all that stuff. And driving back in the truck, we had like, what was it? We had a Ford XLT.
Yeah,
And,
F-150.
yeah. And we're driving back up. And who were we listening to on the way back up? The podcasters that we listened to at night. He was the guy with the racket, the tennis racket. From when he was a character. So, I happened to see this episode of Jim Cornette because I had this fascination during that time of watching like what was called shoot interviews. And if you're new to this sort of thing, a shoot interview is where it's either the character or the person out of character, right? You know, you'll say, hey, Dwayne Johnson, you know, not The Rock, but Dwayne Johnson talking about his, you know, how his run started in WWE and all that stuff. So Jim Cornette and his friend Brian were talking about just like the wrestling updates.
Yeah.
And what was the thing that had us cracking up?
Usually he does a lot of comedy.
Yeah. It was before the pandemic. He was talking about, hey, you know what that sounds like when you eat one of those? Yeah, he's like, it's the sound my stomach makes after a late night run to Taco Bell before the pandemic.
That's disgusting.
And we were instantly hooked after that on Jim and Brian.
He did other comedy stuff before that.
Right.
So.
So Jim and Brian, if you ever hear this, you're one of the reasons why probably that we're still alive, because like you're one of the reasons why. Because it was like, we'll have your episodes on at night while we're asleep, you know, and Edmond's mom had this like bird music, and so we'll alternate between the bird music and then Jim and Brian. And it was like, you know what? You know, this whole fixed mindset of trying to find work when we were down south, and I had a corporate position that wasn't going to go anywhere, and because everyone thought I was a threat, like half the crowd that I was working with thought I was a spook from corporate, because I wasn't afraid of anyone. And they wouldn't even train Edmond on anything in the store. Like, it's like, okay, well, they're not going to train Edmond just even bagging stuff or taking out the trash, but they'll hire someone who has multiple felony convictions and all this other nonsense, and you know, shouldn't be anywhere near a public setting, you know, for certain reasons. I think what that was, and I could be 100% wrong in this, was they saw potential in you that other people were afraid of. And I think what happens is you'll see toxic family, fake friends, other people in public places and stuff that will have a fear of you just saying, okay, yeah, we're homeless. We've been homeless for going on 11 months. But hey, let's go to the park, let's start the podcast and get it up and running. You know, even though this is just like an introductory podcast, introductory episode, at least we went out and effing did something, right? Where all the people around you, 99% of the people around you, are afraid to even try anything, you know, because they're afraid all social pressure is, you know, I'm going to get canceled, I'm going to get threatened with bodily harm, you know, someone at my job in a position of authority is going to see this and fire me. And I was like, we've been so conditioned, and I used to live this way myself, just to live in a feeling of fear and anxiety that we don't face everything and rise. And if you do, that's when you get outcast. That's when you get thrown overboard. You know, there's some people that have intended on causing us severe harm. And some of those people legally have been dealt with. And, you know, there's a few people that we've been asked not to name that, you know, in due time, they're going to, you know, the legal system's going to work itself out. So, whenever you have this idea of saying, hey, you know, even if it has nothing to do with pro wrestling or something, you want to be that next tech person or something. You want to be that next singer. You want to turn white hip hop into something really fucking badass. There's one F-bomb. You went out and did it. Our cat in Kentucky, you know, is white hip hop, and he became a tech person.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, like a total, like, apocalypse nerd person, one of the smart ones, right? And people looked at him like he was, like, crazy and stuff. And now he's one of the coolest people we know. And so you'll be amazed at who you... Here's another thing. We'll end on this. A lot of times people get, like, you know, like Edmond said, where people get jealous of you or they're afraid they're going to lose control over you. It's because you're going to see that a lot of people who've made it to the big time, you know, minus some of the people who've come from money, with few exceptions. I bet Shane and Stephanie are cool as hell in real life.
Yeah.
Even though they came from a lot of money. But you'll notice that a lot of people that you've looked up to have started where Edmond and I are right now. Started from zero, where we thought everything was going to be, for the most part, okay. Our graphic designer cancels us. My wife's church friends threaten us with bodily harm. You know, a manager at my son's workplace threatens them with a 223 in the parking lot. And the police show up and like, oh yeah, you know, it's Brian, right? Yeah, not Brian from the podcast, but another Brian. And like, oh yeah, he can't own a firearm. He just says that. So, you know, you got stupid stuff like that you deal with, and like, you know, all those times Mick Foley was like sleeping in his car.
Yeah.
And he wore the same clothes like we are. And because he was like, dude, I was just living in my car, you know. And we'll end on this saying here. Real quick, brackets control. We're going to have a Patreon set up for some of the Stardome episodes.
Hard to find.
They're hard to find in the US, but we were using a VPN, and I just happened to find Stardome. Like, you're on a public Wi-Fi. Edmond, don't say where it is.
Yeah.
And like trying to connect to your Gmail or like upload to like your cloud server is like terroristic behavior, but you can download Kill Whitey, you know, like till you're blue in the face. And so I remembered I got this VPN from another YouTube influencer and turned it on, and it's a mainstream VPN, and it had dark web search on it. I'm like, what the hell is this? And so I looked for Stardome, and it pops right up. And we couldn't find that, like, even on basic cable, you know, like fiber, you know, connection. So we're gonna do some Stardome walkthroughs while we're in the car at night when there's no one around. And we'll make that as part of our Patreon. Because basically in the next 4 months we're hoping to get to Florida, whether we have day work or not. And we'll be reviewing like some of the pay-per-views as well. Now, since we're just starting out, we'll probably do a walkthrough of SummerSlam and upload that, and then some of the other pay-per-views and Stardoms as they come out. Well, we'll put those on the Patreon. So I think that's about it for now. So that was the introduction episode that we have. And Edmond, do you have anything else to add?
No.
Okay. All right. Can you tell everyone thanks for listening in?
Thanks for watching.
All right. And we will see you guys soon. Thanks.